This was the most brutal beating Iron Man had ever taken, and the person hitting him was none other than his close comrade, Captain America, with whom he had fought side by side to save the world. Just moments ago, Iron Man learned that his parents had been beaten to death by the Winter Soldier. And Captain America, who had fought alongside him all this time, had known the truth but chose to hide it.
Did you know? Yes.
Then, when Iron Man was about to kill the Winter Soldier to avenge his parents, Captain America stood in his way without hesitation, shattering Iron Man's arc reactor. Keep in mind, this was in Siberia, where temperatures are dozens of degrees below freezing. Without his arc reactor, how could someone as ordinary as Tony survive? But I think, compared to the physical pain, Tony's heart must be colder at this moment than the icy wasteland of Siberia. What is really going on here? To understand the whole story, we have to start from the beginning. If you haven't seen the previous Marvel movies, I highly recommend you go back and watch them from my channel. Otherwise, you might not understand this film. You might not fully grasp Iron Man, Captain America, Hawkeye, or any of the superheroes in this movie. Why did Hawkeye, Wanda, and Ant-Man choose to side with Captain America against Iron Man and the world's governments? Why was Captain America so stubborn, so hell-bent on defending the Winter Soldier, even at the cost of turning against his former comrades? All the details have actually been mentioned in previous movies, and I'll break them down one by one after this film ends. Alright, enough chit-chat. Let's dive straight into the main event. This is the 15th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain America: Civil War, released in 2016. It's also one of only 2 Marvel films that have ever brought me to tears. Ever since the Avengers formed, every superhero has fought relentlessly to bring down criminals, but their righteous actions have also brought disaster upon innocent civilians. During a mission in Africa, Wanda, in an attempt to protect Captain America, hurled a criminal high into the sky, but what she didn't know was that the criminal had a bomb strapped to him. The explosion destroyed an entire building, killing hundreds of people in the blast. Seeing the consequences of her actions, Wanda was filled with guilt. She locked herself at home, watching the harsh criticism from the media on TV over and over again. Steve quickly comforted her, telling Wanda that they were doing the right thing. Any battle inevitably comes with sacrifices. Everyone wants to be a hero, but when the time comes to pay the price for being one, very few can accept it with grace.
It's a job. We try to save as many people as we can. Sometimes it doesn't mean everybody. But if we can't find a way to live with that, next time, maybe nobody gets saved.
At that moment, Vision appeared, telling Steve that Tony had brought an unexpected guest. That guest was General Ross, representing the US government. Because of this irreversible disaster caused by the superheroes' negligence, the world's governments, driven by their own interests, decided it was time to rein in the Avengers' unchecked actions. King Chaka of Africa was the most emotional among them, as 11 of his country's key leaders had perished in the explosion. Known for his deep love for his people, King Chaka was furious at the superheroes' behavior. So, King Chaka filed a lawsuit, taking the Avengers to the United Nations. He joined forces with 117 countries to draft the Sokovia Accords, demanding that the Avengers sign and submit to the authority of a special UN task force. General Ross was sent to notify each Avenger and show them footage of the numerous tragedies caused by superheroes in recent years. For example, the Battle of New York in the Avengers 1, the collapse of S.H.I.E.L.D. in Captain America 2, and most notably, the catastrophic destruction of Sokovia in the Avengers 2, where an entire city was obliterated during the superheroes' battle. One by one, these shocking disasters illustrated the dangers posed by superheroes, yet not a single word was said about what might have happened had the superheroes not intervened. After that, Ross placed a document in front of them, considering the undeniable harm that the Avengers had caused to ordinary citizens. Tony was the first to compromise. He even cited the death of a young boy during the Sokovia incident. The boy, an excellent student, was volunteering in Sokovia over his summer break. He had a bright future ahead of him, but because of the Avengers' actions in Sokovia, his young life was cut short. His mother blamed Tony for everything.
You murdered him in Sokovia. Not that that matters in the least to you. You think you fight for us? You just fight for yourself. Who's going to avenge my son, Stark? He's dead, and I blame you.
In that moment, Tony realized that what Captain America had said to Wanda was right. Everyone wants to be a hero, but once they become one, very few can accept the cost that comes with it. At least he couldn't accept it. Perhaps having the government make decisions for him would prevent more innocent people from being hurt. This is why Tony insisted on accepting government oversight, but Captain America was different.
If we sign this, we surrender our right to choose.
What if this panel sends us somewhere we don't think we should go? What if there's somewhere we need to go and they don't let us? We may not be perfect, but the safest hands are still our own.
If we don't do this now, it's going to be done to us later. That's the fact. That won't be pretty.
You're saying they'll come for me.
We would protect you.
Maybe Tony's right. We have one hand on the wheel, we can still steer.
As early as Captain America, the first Avenger, Steve had already realized that governments and organizations are made up of individuals, and as long as they are human, they will have selfish desires. For example, during World War II, politicians made Steve perform in a circus as a clown to raise money. In Captain America, the Winter Soldier, he was betrayed by S.H.I.E.L.D. So, he told Fury,
Shield, Hydra. It all goes.
because he would never allow anyone to manipulate his sense of justice. Yet, when Tony tried to persuade him, Steve was suddenly unsure of what to do. At that moment, a message broke the silence, and Steve's heart sank completely. He rushed to London to attend Peggy's funeral. The woman he loved most had finally passed away. Looking at Peggy's portrait, Steve was still debating whether or not to sign the accords, but it was Peggy's niece, Sharon, who delivered a speech at the funeral that steadied his wavering heart.
I asked her once how she managed to master diplomacy and espionage in a time when no one wanted to see a woman succeed at either. And she said, compromise where you can. But where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree.
After the funeral, everyone left, but Steve remained lost in his memories. That's when Natasha appeared. She was worried about Steve being too lonely, so she stayed with him and told him she was going to Vienna with Tony to sign the Sokovia Accords. Rhodey and Vision also agreed to sign. Hawkeye, on the other hand, refused and chose to retire.
Just because it's the path of least resistance doesn't mean it's the wrong path. Staying together is more important than how we stay together.
I can't sign it.
I know.
Well, then what are you doing here?
I didn't want you to be alone.
It seemed the matter was settled, but unexpectedly, someone bombed the United Nations building. Black Panther's father, King T'Chaka, was killed in the explosion, once again putting the Avengers in the spotlight. According to surveillance footage, the one responsible for the bombing was none other than Captain America's friend, Bucky. In an effort to protect his friend, Steve learned of Bucky's whereabouts in Germany with Sharon's help. Seeing Bucky's shabby room and the files he had kept about Steve, it was clear Bucky had regained his memory and remembered him.
Do you know me?
You're Steve. I wasn't in Vienna. I don't do that anymore.
They're entering the building.
Well, the people who think you did are coming here now. And they're not planning on taking you alive.
Just then, the police surrounded Bucky. He assumed Steve had come to arrest him. As he desperately tried to escape, he realized that not only was Steve not trying to capture him, but he was also buying him time by holding off the police. Giving him the chance to leap out of the building, Bucky thought he had successfully escaped, but was ambushed by a dark figure. That figure was none other than T'Challa, the new king of Wakanda, wearing his Black Panther suit. T'Challa sought vengeance for his father's death. After a few intense exchanges, Bucky found it difficult to fend off Black Panther's attacks. At that moment, a military helicopter appeared and unleashed gunfire at them. Luckily, Falcon swooped in and knocked the helicopter off course, allowing Bucky to escape. The group continued their chase into an underground tunnel, providing the audience with one of Marvel's most thrilling pursuit sequences. Captain America, after running for a long time, finally realized how exhausting it was to chase on foot, so he grabbed a police car from the officers. Black Panther also jumped into the car with Captain America. To cover Bucky's escape, Captain America blocked the pursuing police while telling Falcon to find a way to shake off Black Panther. At that moment, Bucky hijacked a motorcycle. Falcon intended to knock Black Panther down, but instead, Black Panther used the opportunity to catch up to Bucky. They clashed again. Captain America caught up and tackled Black Panther, shielding Bucky behind him. However, Black Panther's intervention caused them to lose their last chance to escape. With War Machine's arrival, they had no choice but to surrender and were stripped of all their gear by the military. Bucky was then taken to the German Ministry of Defense, where he was scheduled to undergo a psychological evaluation before being extradited to the US for trial. When Tony heard Steve had been captured, he rushed to persuade him to sign the accords. If Steve signed, his actions could be legalized, and Bucky wouldn't be sent to Wakanda's prison but instead to a psychiatric hospital in the US for treatment. It's clear that Tony was doing everything he could for Steve. Just as Steve was about to waver and sign, Tony accidentally let slip that Wanda had been placed under house arrest. This revelation extinguished any intention Steve had of signing the accords. Many people don't understand why Steve was so stubborn. From this incident, it's clear that he wasn't being unreasonable. He simply despised how the world used rules to restrict their freedom and manipulate them into doing things they believed were unjust. While Steve and Tony's negotiations fell apart again, a conspiracy that would shatter the already fragile Avengers was quietly unfolding. The psychologist entered the interrogation room to evaluate Bucky. While a delivery truck arrived at the city's power station, the driver completed the delivery paperwork as usual. But when the staff opened the package, they were puzzled by the unfamiliar equipment. The next second, the powerful battery pulse instantly destroys the nearby power system. The psychologist, revealed to be Baron Zemo, showed his true colors. He took a small red book from his bag, which contained the exact words to control Bucky. After Zemo recited the words, Bucky reverted to his default programming, becoming a mindless killing machine. But Zemo didn't order him to kill. Instead, he wanted to know what mission Bucky had been sent on by Hydra on December 16, 1991. That was the day Tony's parents were killed. Hydra had sent Bucky to steal the super soldier serum from Tony's father, and Bucky executed both of Tony's parents. Steve and Sam arrived to confront Zemo, but Bucky attacked Sam. Without their equipment, Steve and Sam were no match for Bucky. Sam was knocked down, and Steve was thrown into an elevator shaft. Meanwhile, Zemo made his escape. Sam wanted to catch Zemo, but the guy was too cunning and managed to escape. Meanwhile, Bucky was still desperately trying to flee. Seeing the chaos Bucky was causing, Tony, even without his suit, had no choice but to step forward and try to stop him. However, even with Natasha and Chala coming to help, they were no match for Bucky without their equipment. Bucky, uninterested in fighting, headed straight for the rooftop, intending to escape by helicopter. But Steve didn't want his friend to repeat the same mistakes. He rushed forward, grabbing the bottom of the helicopter, and forcibly stopped it from taking off. Seeing that escape was impossible, Bucky pulled the lever, sending the helicopter crashing towards Steve, and the rapidly spinning blades almost sliced Steve to pieces. As soon as Steve got back on his feet, Bucky grabbed him by the throat, and he couldn't break free. Luckily, the helicopter was teetering on the edge of the building. Using the last of his strength, Steve pushed the helicopter off the building, sending it crashing into the river below. He not only freed himself from Bucky's grasp but also managed to save the unconscious Bucky, taking him to a deserted factory where no one would find them. Bucky's arm was pinned beneath a 2-ton hydraulic press. When Bucky regained consciousness, he immediately revealed Zemo's conspiracy to Steve. Zemo had also learned from Bucky about the location of 5 other Winter Soldiers, still frozen. Back when Bucky retrieved the Super Soldier Serum for Hydra, they used it to create 5 Winter Soldiers who were even deadlier than Bucky by 10-fold. Each of them was fluent in over 30 languages, possessed top-tier intelligence gathering abilities, and any one of them could single-handedly bring down a nation. Their only flaw was their bad temper and refusal to follow orders. Thanks to them, the Soviet regime was successfully toppled. Eventually, these 5 Winter Soldiers were frozen in Siberia, awaiting the moment to be reawakened. Steve knew how dangerous these soldiers were. If Zemo wasn't stopped, many more lives would be lost to his ambitions. Now, all they had to do was capture Zemo. Not only would that stop his plot, but it would also clear Bucky's name. Before acting, Steve managed to retrieve his shield and Sam's wings with Sharon's help. As Steve looked at the woman who had always silently supported him, Sharon's features reminded him of her aunt, Peggy. Lost in the moment, Steve kissed her, but the three of them alone wouldn't be enough. Their biggest obstacle wasn't Zemo, but the world's governments and the US military. When General Ross learned that Steve had disappeared with Bucky, he immediately wanted to send a special forces team to capture them. To protect his friend, Tony stepped forward, promising to bring Steve and Bucky in within 36 hours. Both sides began assembling their teams. Steve first called on Hawkeye to come out of retirement and rescue Wanda from Vision. Then, he brought in another of his admirers, Ant-Man, Scott Lang. So far, a team of 6 was formed to prevent Steve from making further mistakes. Tony recruited Spider-Man. This was Spider-Man's official debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and his first mission wasn't to save the world, but to fight in a civil war. With War Machine, Natasha, Black Panther, and Vision, Tony's side also formed a 6-person team. The film's climax was officially underway. Out of their past friendship, Tony still tried to persuade Steve to surrender. Captain America made it clear that they were facing a much bigger threat and couldn't let Zemo reach the sleeping Winter Soldiers first. But to Tony's side, this sounded like a delaying tactic by Captain America. Their conflict was beyond reconciliation, and the fight began. As soon as the words left his mouth, Captain America's shield was taken by Spider-Man, and even his hands were bound by webs. Hawkeye fired an arrow from a distance, freeing Captain America from the web. The miniaturized Ant-Man took advantage of the situation, sneaking up on Spider-Man and reclaiming Captain America's shield.
Brody, you want to take Cap?
Hey, Mr. Stark, what should I do?
What we discussed, keep your distance, web him up.
Okay, copy that.
Captain America immediately stepped in to block Black Panther, who was seeking revenge, and the two of them became the first pair to face off. Black Panther's suit, like Captain America's shield, was made of vibranium, allowing him to easily withstand the blows from Captain America's shield. As the intense battle raged on, Ant-Man was still showing mercy toward Natasha, holding back in the fight. Fortunately, Ant-Man can change size at will, which barely tipped the scales in his favor. Meanwhile, Tony was chasing down Wanda and Hawkeye, bombarding them with heavy fire, leaving them overwhelmed. But Wanda's powers were no joke. With a flick of her hand, she summoned cars from the garage, pinning Tony underneath one before he could dodge. All of this effort was to cover Bucky's retreat, but Spider-Man wasn't going to let them escape that easily. He launched himself into the hall, kicking Falcon away and effortlessly catching one of Bucky's strongest punches. Falcon pulled Spider-Man away, but Spider-Man's webbing jammed Falcon's flight thrusters. When Bucky tried to help Falcon, Spider-Man easily trapped him in the floor with more webbing. Just as Spider-Man was about to fire another web, Falcon's Red-Wing drone swooped in and pulled him out of the battle. Outside, Captain America was fending off both Black Panther and War Machine on his own, when Ant-Man arrived just in time to toss him a toy car.
Now!
This unexpected attack only escalated the tension between the two sides, where they had previously held back out of respect. The gloves were now off. The conflict intensified, escalating from a small skirmish into a full-scale 6-on-6 battle. Wanda, the powerful sorceress, was reduced to a support role just after helping Hawkeye. She immediately had to assist the Winter Soldier by flinging Black Panther away. Meanwhile, the interaction between Spider-Man and Captain America was quite amusing. Spider-Man was a total chatterbox, not seeming like he came to fight at all. Although Captain America didn't want to fight a kid, Spider-Man was far too persistent. So, Captain America had to figure out a way to immobilize him, if only temporarily. On the other side, Falcon was struggling against Iron Man's relentless pursuit and called Hawkeye for help. Ant-Man shrank down, perched on Hawkeye's shoulder, and charged toward Iron Man. He crawled inside Iron Man's suit, attempting to sabotage his circuitry, but Iron Man had an internal flush system that forced Ant-Man out. After a fierce battle, the two sides remained evenly matched. Captain America knew that dragging things out wouldn't work. He and Bucky had to break through. To help Captain America and Bucky escape, Ant-Man decided to use his ultimate move. He ran along the gangway, leaped onto War Machine, and then pressed the button on his suit, instantly growing to thousands of times his normal size. He easily grabbed War Machine's legs and flung him into the air. Fortunately, Spider-Man caught War Machine, saving him from a worse fate. Though Ant-Man's power wasn't that great in his enlarged form, his enormous size definitely obstructed the others from giving chase. Captain America and Bucky took the opportunity to run toward the hangar. Vision phased through Ant-Man's body and fired a laser that destroyed the control tower. Just as the hangar doors were about to be buried under the collapsing tower, Wanda quickly used her powers to stop the tower from falling, allowing Captain America and Bucky to enter the hangar safely. However, Natasha and Black Panther had caught up with them. It seemed inevitable that another fight would break out, but Natasha turned her weapon on Black Panther instead, covering Captain America's escape. Tony and Rhodey, having just dealt with Ant-Man, immediately set off to chase Captain America's plane, but Falcon was interfering with both of them. Rhodey called on Vision for support, but the laser Vision fired at Falcon missed and struck War Machine's arc reactor instead. With his power source knocked out, War Machine plummeted to the ground, and Rhodey lost consciousness. Tony and Falcon turned back to help him, but they were too late, watching helplessly as War Machine crashed into the earth. When Tony arrived, Rhodey was already gravely injured and barely hanging on. Fortunately, he still had a heartbeat, so he likely wouldn't die. Cradling his injured friend, Tony's hatred for Captain America reached its peak. At this point, Tony probably hated Captain America, but his feelings would soon change. Before boarding a flight to Moscow, Zemo called his hotel, placing an order for room service. In fact, he deliberately notified the hotel staff to enter the room, because the body in the bathtub was the psychologist originally assigned to evaluate Bucky. Why would Zemo reveal this information himself? Because it was all part of his plan. The answer would soon be revealed. After receiving official confirmation of this incident, Tony slowly realized that Steve had been telling the truth. Everything that had happened recently was Zemo's doing. Since losing his family in Sokovia, Zemo had sworn to make the Avengers pay for their deaths. And now, his plan was reaching its final stage. Armed with the information about the Winter Soldiers, Zemo arrived at their hidden facility ahead of Captain America. Now, all he had to do was wait for Captain America and Iron Man to arrive. Once Tony understood the truth, he realized he had misjudged Steve. If everything was part of Zemo's plot, then Steve was in serious danger. He had to help him. Tony quickly made his way to the underwater prison. Hawkeye and the others had been imprisoned for helping Steve and Bucky. The most infuriating part was that Wanda had been fitted with an electric collar, subjected to inhumane treatment. Seeing his former comrades like this tore Tony apart, but the most important thing was finding out where Steve had gone. Tony dropped his usual arrogance and sincerely apologized to Sam. Seeing the sincerity in Tony's eyes, Sam chose to trust him, but he made Tony promise to go alone to find Steve. Tony wasted no time, immediately taking a helicopter and leaving the underwater prison. When General Ross asked Tony if he had gathered any clues, Tony chose to keep it a secret. As soon as Tony was out of the military surveillance zone, he quickly suited up and flew towards Steve's location, but what he didn't know was that there was another jet following closely behind him through the thick clouds. Soon, Tony caught up with Steve and Bucky, who had entered the base. Captain America remained wary of Tony's arrival, but it wasn't until Tony admitted his mistakes that Captain America finally lowered his shield. The three of them explored the depths of the base together and discovered the remaining 5 Winter Soldiers, but to Captain America's surprise, the Winter Soldiers were all dead, each one shot in the head by Zemo. Steve had thought Zemo would use them for evil purposes, but in reality, they were just bait to lure Steve, Bucky, and Tony to the base. Captain America immediately stepped forward to question Zemo's true intentions. The stage was set, and the 3 main players had all arrived. It was time for the final act. Zemo turned on a television and walked away. The footage on the screen was of Bucky murdering Tony's parents, as Tony watched his father get beaten to death, punch after punch, and his mother begging for her life only to be choked to death. He lost all reason in a fit of rage. Adding to his pain was the fact that Captain America had known about this and chose to keep it from him, which completely shattered Tony's trust. Ignoring Captain America's attempts to stop him, Tony was determined to kill Bucky and avenge his parents. But he was no match for Captain America and the Winter Soldier together. Even though Bucky, racked with guilt, only wanted to escape, Captain America fought Tony with lethal intent to protect him. As Bucky was about to make it out of the base, Tony fired a blast that destroyed the exit. At that point, Bucky was enraged. He realized that unless he took Tony down, there would be no end to this. So, He gave it everything he had and teamed up with Captain America to attack Tony. Bucky got an opening and tried to rip out Tony's arc reactor, but his metal arm was shattered in the process. Seeing this as his chance to kill Bucky, Tony charged all his power for a lethal shot, only to have Captain America block it, risking his life. Captain America then closed the distance, using his shield to relentlessly strike Tony. Tony's suit was severely damaged, but with the help of his AI, he quickly analyzed Captain America's fighting pattern and devised a counterattack, leaving Captain America heavily injured, although Captain America was too weakened to keep fighting.
He's my friend. So was I.
Let's not forget he's Steve, the man who may not beat you but can wear you down for days if necessary. Tony prepared to charge another blast to finish Captain America off, but Bucky interrupted his attack, allowing Captain America to pin Tony to the ground again. This time, Captain America struck hard, destroying Tony's arc reactor with the shield Tony's father had made for him. No wonder Tony said that Steve didn't deserve the shield.
That shield doesn't belong to you.
Captain America then threw the shield aside and left with Bucky. Zemo watched the entire scene unfold, but there was no joy of revenge in his heart. In the end, it didn't matter to him who won or lost. The Avengers Empire had already been torn apart from the inside. At that moment, Black Panther appeared behind Zemo. He had just witnessed everything from a god's eye view, and he had also seen that hatred would only reveal bitter fruits. Silently, he retracted his claws. He had no intention of taking revenge on Bucky or Zemo.
Vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them. I'm done letting it consume me.
Zemo pulled out his old phone from years ago and listened to his wife's voicemail one last time, where she asked him to come home for dinner. He raised a gun, ready to reunite with them in death, but Black Panther stopped him, because if Zemo escaped the law's punishment, his hate would only fuel more hate. Zemo was eventually imprisoned in the U.S., and Tony returned to Avengers headquarters. Once bustling with activity, the Avengers Hall was now eerily quiet, with only Tony, Vision, and the gravely injured Rhodey remaining. The rest of the team had been broken out of the underwater prison by Captain America. Steve and Bucky sought refuge in Black Panther's Wakanda, until the Hydra brainwashing commands in Bucky's mind could be removed. Bucky chose to put himself back into cryogenic sleep. Then Steve wrote a letter to Tony, in which he essentially apologized for hiding the truth about Bucky killing Tony's parents. He initially kept it a secret because he was afraid of hurting Tony. Later, Steve realized that he was actually afraid of hurting himself after all. Both Tony and Bucky were his friends. As for the Sokovia Accords, Steve still believed in personal freedom over government control, so he wouldn't be returning to the Avengers. However, he promised Tony that if he ever needed him, he would be there, and with that, the original Avengers team officially disbanded. Where would their paths lead in the future? Stay tuned for my upcoming videos. Now, let's analyze why Hawkeye, Wanda, and Ant-Man chose to help Captain America, while Vision and War Machine sided with Tony and supported the Sokovia Accords. Let's also discuss why Natasha initially sided with Tony but later switched to helping Captain America. First, let's look at Captain America's side. The simplest one is Ant-Man. In Ant-Man 1, when Scott Lang became the second-generation Ant-Man, Hank Pym told him that he never wanted to share his suit's technology with Stark Industries. Plus, Scott was a huge fan of Captain America, so like Falcon, he had no reason not to side with Cap. Wanda's reasons stemmed from the fact that after her mistake, only Captain America showed her care and comfort, while Tony took a hardline approach and put her under house arrest. So when Hawkeye came to break her out, Wanda hesitated, but when she heard that Captain America needed her, she made up her mind to escape and help him. Wanda knew full well that the moment she stepped out that door, she would become a fugitive. As for Hawkeye, he was perhaps the most difficult to understand. One thing's for sure, he wouldn't side with Tony. After S.H.I.E.L.D. collapsed from Hydra infiltration, Hawkeye lost faith in the government. That's why he chose to retire rather than sign the Sokovia Accords. So why did he choose Captain America? I can only speculate based on previous films. In Avengers, Age of Ultron, Wanda's brother, Quicksilver, sacrificed himself to save Hawkeye. Out of guilt for Quicksilver's death, Hawkeye likely wanted to save Wanda. If the later films provide an explanation for why Hawkeye sided with Captain America, feel free to let me know in the comments. As for Iron Man's side, There's no need to say much about War Machine. Rhodey is Iron Man's close friend and a military officer. Black Panther is also straightforward. He was driven by revenge for his father's death. Vision's reasoning is twofold. First, as a super-intelligent being, he analyzed the situation and determined that the Sokovia Accords were the best way to prevent further disasters. Second, Vision was essentially created by Tony, so his personality was much like Tony's, grounded in logic and science. Natasha is the most complex character to understand. She had a close relationship with Hawkeye in the Avengers. In Avengers: Age of Ultron, she had a flirtation with the Hulk. In Captain America, her relationship with Steve grew increasingly close. And now, in Civil War, she finds herself caught between Captain America and Tony. Initially, she sided with Tony, but in the end, she chose to help Captain America. You could say Natasha's motivations are as deep as the ocean. So why did Natasha switch sides to help Captain America in the end? Was it because she liked Steve? I think she shares Steve's belief in personal freedom, but she also hopes that the Avengers can stay united and not be divided. Natasha probably thought that signing the Sokovia Accords was the only way to ensure the Avengers' safety and keep them from falling apart. A necessary compromise. Natasha is one of Marvel's most layered and complex characters, which is why she's become the leading lady of the MCU. And it's not just because of her looks. Next up is Natasha's solo movie. That's all for this episode. Stay tuned for Black Widow in the next one. See you then.